Yo, you ever heard of Gradius? Otherwise known as Nemesis, this 1985 space shooter is a arcade classic created by Konami. And look, I know what you're thinking. Fuck Konami, Kojima for life, I'm out. But listen, don't go just yet. Because you see, Gradius is one of the granddaddies of shoot 'em ups. Without Gradius, I dread to think where the genre would be now. There'd probably be no R-Type, there'd be none of that bullet hell shit that some of you like so much. It would all be different. So where do I begin with this game? Well, for one, the team that made this game had never ever made a game before. That's right, this game was their first project, and they hit it out the park on the first try. This entire game was made by a bunch of new guys who had never actually made a full game before as a team. So what I'm doing in this video is I've divided my footage into two sides just to save time. So on the left we have loop 1, and on the right we have loop 2. What do I mean by loops? Well, Gradius, like many old arcade games, loops infinitely. Once you beat the game, it sends you back to the beginning, and you start all over and have to do it all again. Only there are some small differences. On the left, none of the enemies are fighting back, I'm shooting them, they're exploding, they're dying, and I'm meeting no resistance. But on the right, in loop 2, after I've already beaten the game once and started over, you probably noticed all these enemies, they're shooting back, they're fighting back, they're shooting revenge bullets. Even now it's a pretty influential game, and in many respects, despite being over 30 years old, I still think it's pretty modern in a lot of ways. And the fact that many games still continue to copy a lot of the things it did is just a testament to that. Things that modernise it include being able to choose what weapons you're actually using. As you can see, I'm picking up power-ups, but I'm not using them all immediately. If I want to, I can increase my speed, or I can just save my power-ups and put them into other things, such as getting additional options, getting missiles, getting more powerful lasers. There's a lot of flexibility for how you can play this game, which is good because you're going to need that flexibility and you're going to need those power-ups and all the other help you can get because this game is hard. No continues, you got to do this in a run and go. You're probably thinking, wow, it used to be pretty good if you can beat the game in one go. Nope, I cannot beat the game in one credit, and I probably won't be able to for some time. That's right, I'm using save states, I'm not even afraid to admit it. If I weren't using save states, I probably wouldn't be able to beat this game, I wouldn't be able to make this video, I wouldn't be able to tell you just how good Gradius is. How good is Gradius? Well, it's one of Hideki Kamiya's favourite games. If you know who Hideki Kamiya is, you'll know that's pretty high praise. Do I care that I've used a save state? Not really, because I would like to argue today that save states are something we should give more credit to. Save states are overall a good for games, not an evil. In the case of Gradius, when I started making this video, I made one rule. Use save states purely at the start of levels, nowhere else. Because while I might not be good enough to one credit clear the game, I sure as hell can beat all the levels on one life. One of the problems with Gradius being an arcade game is you don't really get second chances. If you die, you lose all your power-ups. So immediately, all that opposition and struggle and obstacles you just had to overcome, they've now completely changed. You've lost your power-ups, you can't tackle them in the same way. In fact, the game itself becomes easier if you die and lose your power-ups. It uses dynamic difficulty, which again is also another impressive thing about it. So a few years ago I read this book by a writer called James Paul Gee. He's a specialist in video game teaching and video game learning. He wrote a book called What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. And in that book, he talked about what was known as the principles of good learning. Save states help satisfy several of Paul Gee's 36 learning principles. Some of these principles include the psychological moratorium principle. What's that? What it basically means is you can take risks in a space where real-world consequences are lowered. In the case of Gradius, if you die, you lose all your power-ups and you'll probably game over afterwards because you're too underpowered. This boss right here is probably the hardest boss in the game. Now I said I'm only going to use save states at the start of levels. That was a lie. On loop 2 on the right side, I had to cheat and use my save state at the start of the boss fight. Those things that just teleport in and hit you, they're fine on loop 1 when they don't fire back, but loop 2 when you destroy them they fire back, you're gonna die and you're gonna die and you're gonna die. Anyway, moving back to Gee's principles, another principle that the game gains when you're using save states is the self-knowledge principle. The self-knowledge principle is world construction where players learn a domain and their current potential. In the case of Gradius playing without save states, my current potential was measured purely in how far I could get on one credit. Whereas once I started using save states, I could actually get more specific examples of what my potential was. This is something I get from save states that I don't get anywhere else. I can lose to certain bosses or get hit by certain things. and I'll know what my potential is for avoiding those type of patterns or anticipating certain types of attacks. Those are things that I do not get the benefit of out save states, just doing 1cc attempts. Moving on to stage 3, the stage with the infamous Moai heads. This stage can be pretty tricky if you don't know how to get through it. I'd say 90% of the time I would die on this stage. Getting through it deathless was very difficult, but thanks to save states I was actually able to play enough that I could come up with a semi-reliable strategy. In fact, surprisingly, the amount of attempts it took me to get through this stage was quite low. Something that I wouldn't have been able to do had I just played it from the beginning every time I died. Playing unassisted, you miss out on a lot of learning opportunities. Playing with assistance, you get a chance to learn things you wouldn't learn normally. You get to practice all these things that are kind of essential. That's why in the shoot 'em up genre now, we see many modern releases that don't just give you access to the game, they give you access to save states so you can trial and error your way through certain bits, and they give you a practice mode where you can fight certain bosses or even complete stages and see what went well with them and what went wrong. It's just immediate access to the things you need to practice without having to play through the entire game. Next principle is the practice principle. Practice is less boring if you're not thinking to yourself, I gotta do that again. Having quick access to the thing that was giving you trouble, the thing you were making mistakes against, and being able to try it again and again and again and experience it immediately, that's one of the best ways to quickly learn how to break a habit. Next principle is the regime of competence principle. Telling someone like practice Gradius by 1cc'ing the game, playing through every level without dying or game overing, it's just not practical for learning. It's way out of people's ability. If you don't have the ability to do something, you can't even begin to learn how to do it. At least with something like clearing levels without dying, no matter how difficult that level is, I can still learn something from that level just by clipping certain sequences of it. Because I know if I see the obstacles enough times, I'll be able to realise what it is I'm struggling with and how they're working. But without something like save states to give me immediate access to those problems so I can practice them again and again, I will never get my competence to a level where I'm ready for those challenges. Okay, so stage 4 took a lot of practice to get good enough to 1 life. There's just a lot of traps in the stage that you're not going to know about if you're not ready for them, like those little bastards that come behind you just there, and a sequence like this where you've got a bunch of launch bases coming at you at once. The amount of stuff you have to account for is insane. If you don't have your options lined up behind you, then those little walker dudes will just come up right behind you and ram into you and you'll die instantly. All those ships that the launch bases are sending out, if you have too many upgrades, they will shoot bullets the moment they pass you, and that is incredibly infuriating if you're not using save states. This stage was so difficult, I just couldn't beat it. I got to the end boss rush a few times, but that'd be as far as I'd go. The bosses would come, and I'd never seen that pattern before, and I had no idea how to react. I had no practice, I had no reference. But now, with save states, I have plenty of reference to help me. Using save states changes Gradius on a few fundamental levels, not in a negative way either. I think it's quite useful. Every time I got to here, I could not afford to experiment. I would always die and get a game over because I was not ready for it. I was under-equipped, under-prepped, and I did not have a good strategy for getting through it. But thanks to save states, I get to put myself in a space where I can take these risks without the real-world consequence. If I don't use save states, there's a very real-world consequence that I'm going to lose several tens of minutes to having to start over. But with save states, I just reset the stage, take it calmly, learn new patterns, get to the boss, try a strategy. If it doesn't work, try again and keep trying. I'm not suffering any massive consequence for failure. I'm getting another chance to learn until eventually I get it perfect. And now I'm at the point where I feel like I can beat that stage every time without problems. Speaking of stages I can beat every time without problems, you wouldn't know it looking at this, but on both loops, I beat this stage on the first go. I said stage 1 was the easiest, that's a lie. I honestly think that stage 5 is probably the easiest in the game, because these weird worm alien things are the only things you fight. And as long as you know going in what weapons to use, ideally you want to use the laser I think. I don't think the double shot's any good. You'll be fine and dandy for it. Yeah, the game here has a hell of a lot of slowdown. The version of Gradius I'm playing is the Arcade Archives release from the Konami Arcade Classics collection. It's an okay version of the game, but there are a few disappointing things. Regards to save states, you only get one save state for the entire game. So if I wanted to practice an individual level, I'd have to play up to that level first, then make a save state. I can't just make a save state for every individual level, which would have been fantastic for practice. But you know, having one save state's better than nothing, I guess, so I'll just have to keep grinding the stage I want until I get it. A lot of modern shoot 'em ups do include practice modes, but with Gradius, that just simply isn't an option, especially if you're playing the arcade release. So at least with save states, we have some way to circumvent the issue of no practice mode in classic games. New reports of classic games could put in practice modes, but I think for most developers, save state is just the one-size-fits-all solution. It's just way simpler. With a lot of new games rejecting the old live system from the arcades, having save states does get rid of the need for lives. It does help modernize the games by default. In the case of Gradius, if I don't have lives and I'm not losing my power-ups every time I die and I'm just going back to the start of the stage, that's totally cool, which is just way more modern. It's how we play all our new games. I don't think we should punish people for playing the game that way, otherwise they're probably never going to enjoy it and they're probably never going to complete it. If they just give up on the game and don't enjoy it, then what was the point? Why take that joy away from other people, you know? Although it's aged in some areas, I think Gradius is still a good game now, and I do like the looping system. After I finished loops 1 and 2, I moved on to the third loop just to try it. And the thing about Gradius is every time you loop the game, it gets progressively more difficult. I don't know the exact number, but I've been told the difficulty jumps range from anything from 8 to 10 times. When I tried loop 3, it was just way too difficult. I could not get past it, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to beat it. I've done some research online, and I've seen videos of people doing crazy stuff like getting up to loop 19 on one life. I don't even want to think of the time and dedication it would have took to get so good that you can beat Gradius 19 times in a row with steadily increasing difficulty without losing a life. It's just unfathomable to me that a human being is capable of that. It's an amazing piece of work and accomplishment. So stage 6 was also surprisingly easy after stage 5. You'd think they'd get harder after stage 4, but the game just kind of goes easy on you. It's almost like you've paid your due and the game's now letting you have fun. Not to say that stages 3 and 4 weren't fun, they're just really difficult if you don't know what you're doing. Whereas in stages like 5 and 6, you can just go straight in and play mostly on reaction. Whereas I feel like if you want to do really well at this game, memorization is absolutely vital for stages 3 and 4. Stage 5 and 6 I also heavily appreciate because of the change of pace it brings to the game. Going from shooting all these ships and having bullets flying everywhere to shooting these aliens, it just slows the game down and I feel not so much relaxed, but I don't feel as tense, I don't have to react as much. Things aren't constantly going wrong, I'm not getting constantly overwhelmed, whether I be playing on loop 1 or loop 2. I just think it's a really good stage. And the boss as well is probably one of the most memorable parts in the game. After 5 stages of enemy rush into Big Core, getting to the end of the stage and fighting this weird alien core thing, it just stands out as something you remember from the game. Final principle that save states tend to help with is the probing principle, trying something, reflecting on it, forming a hypothesis and then testing it and so on. I think the stage that best demonstrates this is the final stage of the game. One thing you might notice if you're looking at the 2 loops, I'm going at this stage with completely different weapons. Whereas in loop 1, I went through the entire stage with the double shot because I wanted to attack the enemies on the ceiling. Whereas in loop 2, I opted for the lasers because I was like, wait a minute, the enemies on the ceilings aren't such a big problem as long as I go around them and shoot them once they've moved forward. By having that experience of being able to play the game multiple times and see all the levels and find out what everything does, I was able to come up with ideas and form a strategy which I could then trial and error until I find a version of that strategy that works for me every time. And even though, again, loop 2 is meant to be harder, if you look at the results by comparing the side-by-sides, the advancement in my understanding and strategy making with this game really shows. I'm coping way better on loop 2. It actually took me way less time to get the loop 2 clear of the stage than it did for me to get the loop 1 clear of the stage. Mainly because I just knew better. If you compare loop 1 and 2, my loadouts were different. On loop 1, I increased my speed, I believe, twice. Whereas on Loop 2, I increased my speed an additional time on top of that because the enemies were faster and I needed more mobility. And in some ways, that added mobility actually helped me out a lot for getting through some of these tough patterns. One of the more amusing parts of Stage 7 is you have this cage coming that's supposed to trap you whilst enemies shoot at you. You're supposed to stay inside this cage and not get shot by avoiding all the bullets that come at you, but you just go over or under it. So with all that said and done, we have now reached the final boss, and hilariously, it is the easiest part of the game. It doesn't fight back, it doesn't resist, all you've got to do is shoot these 6 little nodes, and it's over. The game is beaten. Thank you for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed my commentary in this video. Please try out Gradius if you get the chance, you will not regret it. I will see you next time.